Well, hello and welcome again to our reading of the Greek New Testament, and we're reading the Gospel of Luke, and we're in chapter 4 and up to verse 22. Kai pantes ematurun auto, kai ethaumasdon epitois logois tes caritos tois, ek poromenois, ek tu stomatos autu kai elegon. Uki hutos estin Iosef hutos, kai epon pros autos pantos erete moi ten parabolen tauten, iatra therapiuson se auton. Hossa ekusamen genomina esten kaphaneum poiesen kai hodi ente patridi su. So all of them were bearing witness to him, and they were amazed at his words, at the words of grace, ones which were proceeding from his mouth. So this is dative in apposition to the logos. So we would say graceful words. The Greek says words of grace, which were proceeding from his mouth. And elegon, it's imperfect. They began to say, uki with a question implies the answer yes. So it's something like, surely this man is the son of Joseph. Kai epen pros autus, and they said to him, he said to them, I should say, pantos. It's a funny word here. It has the sense of assuredly or doubtless, at all events. It's used in very strong affirmation here. So doubtless you will say to me, or you will speak to me, this parable. A parabole is a roundabout way of saying something. So surely you will say this parable, or this parable to me. Iatre, vocative from iatros, doctor, therapiuson siauton, heal yourself. Imperative from therapeuo. Hossa, as many things as we heard, having taken place in Capernaum, do them also here in your fatherland. So Greek always puts things around the other way as different to English. So we would say, do also here in your fatherland as many things as we heard having taken place in Capernaum. Apende amen lego humin, and he said, truly I say to you, udes prophetes dectos estin ente patridi autu. So truly I say to you that no prophet is dectos acceptable in his fatherland. The dectos in fact picks up the quote with word up here we saw back up here in verse 19, the acceptable year of the Lord. It's the same word here, dectos. It's from dechemai with a chi, which deaspirates before the tor. So it's just an adjective, so meaning receivable or acceptable. Ep eletheas de lego humin, but in truth I say to you, poloi kerai esin entais. So there were many kerai, from kera, widows, entais hemerais, eliu ento Israel, hoti ekles de ho uranos epi ete tria kai menas hex. Hos egeneto limas megas epi pasanten gang. In the days of Elijah in Israel, when the heaven, we would say the heavens, ekleisthe, aorist passive from kleo, to shut, when the heaven was shut, and we get epi with a period of time. So for a period of, we'd say in English, 3 years and 6 moons, 6 months, when there was a great limos, a great famine, epipasanten, gain upon the whole land. kai pros udemian auton epemphthe helias eme es sarepta te Sidonias pros gunaika keran. And Elijah, aorist passive from Pempo, was sent to none of them. Now it's feminine here because it's agreeing with Kara, the widows. So Elijah was sent to none of them, Ame, except into, now Sarepta is Zarephath. It's the name of the place of Sidon. Now, of course, to a woman who was a widow. In other words, Elijah wasn't sent to the Israelites, he was sent to this other place in Sidon, near Tyre. Kai poloi leproi esin ento Israel epi Elishau to prophetu kai udas auton ekariste eme neman hosuros. And there were many lepers in Israel at the time of, this is Elisha, the prophet. We get epi again in the time of, it's quite a common use of epi in both classical and biblical, and well, certainly good biblical Greek. So in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them, ekathariste, was cleansed except for Naaman the Syrian. So he's making the point here about prophets not being acceptable in their own country, but they do things elsewhere. So this fellow Naaman the Syrian was cleansed, but nobody else. Kai eplestes in pantithim thumu ente synagogae akuontes tauta. And all of them, eplestein aorist passive from pimplami, to fill, so all of them were filled, and it takes a genitive with thumos, with anger, in the synagogue, hearing these things. Kai anastantes ex ebelon auton exotes polios. And having arisen, having stood up, literally they cast him out. They threw him out for the city, and they brought him hios ophruos to Orus. Now these are both genitives here. This is as far as, this is the genitive, third declension from ophrus, this is the genitive ophruos. It means that it's your eyebrow, but it's used here as the brow or edge of the oros. This is another genitive from oros, third declension neuter noun. So it's to the edge of the mountain, literally the brow of the mountain. Epho, upon which the city, oikodometo, this is a pluperfect passive, had been built, from oikodomio. So you get a reduplication, so you get an augment. It can't reduplicate because it's a vowel, so you get an augment here, and lengthening of the epsilon, and oikodomio, and then a pluperfect ending here. So on which the city had been built, their city had been built, hoste katakremnisai auton. This is a funny verb here. It only occurs here in the New Testament. There's a noun formed from this that occurs in the Septuagint, in 2 Chronicles. Otherwise, it's a very rare word. The kremne is used of the edge of a mountain, so it's to throw him down a cliff. Yeah, so as to throw him over the cliff, would be the meaning of it here. Autos de elthon de emesu auton eparuata, and he, having passed through the middle of them, he went on his way. Well, we're not told exactly what this means here. He just suddenly just walks straight past them and disappears. We do get this same thing happening elsewhere in the Gospels, where Jesus is about to be attacked and he just suddenly manages to get away from them. We're never given the details of it. Kai katelthen es Capernaum polintes Galileas, and kai andidascan autus entois sabasin. And he went down into the city of Capernaum of Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath. As we've seen this before, the sabbata is taken grammatically as a neuter plural, but then you get also appears in this form sabbasin, becomes a third declension noun. It's often called metaplasmus is the technical name for this change of declension. This is one that is used a lot in Mark, and interestingly this particular passage is common to Mark, and in fact much of the language in here is directly very, very close to what Mark wrote. Kai exe pleisonto, and they were amazed at his teaching, and that again that line is exactly what's in Mark's Gospel. Hoti en exousia en hologos autou. Mark has this slightly differently worded because his word was with authority. Is that use of en meaning with? In Mark, says, and not like the scribes, but Luke leaves that out actually here. And there was a man in the synagogue having a spirit of an unclean demon, daimonion. Kai anakraxen phone megale, and he cried out with a great voice, Ia! Well, this is just a cry of anguish, really. It's untranslatable, really, except as to say, Ah! Tihemen kai soi Jesu Nazarene. Now that's interesting because this whole line here is exactly what's in Mark, and this is not the usual expression that's used with Jesus in the New Testament. So Luke has taken this directly from Mark, and this expression, what for us and for you, it's an expression which occurs elsewhere in the New Testament and also in the Septuagint. It means something like, what do you and I have in common? What business of yours is mine, etc. And we get Jesus the Nazarene. These are in the vocative. So Jesus of Nazareth. Aelthes apolesai hemas. That's oidas set tis a hohegios to theou. This whole verse is exactly as you see in Mark's Gospel. So have you come to destroy us? I know you who you are. It's a funny expression of certain grammatical structure here, but it's just I know who you are, but it's written as I know you who you are. Hohegios to theou, the Holy One of God. Kai epitimes in auto Jesus legon. Phimothe kai exelte about 2. This again is very, very close to Mark. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Phimotheti. Now this is an aorist passive imperative. The verb is phimo, connected with a word phimos, which is a muzzle, and so it's literally be muzzled. In other words, be quiet, be silenced. It's a very strong word. Some people have tried to connect it with sort of folk magic terms and sort of magical language, but in fact the word does occur elsewhere in the New Testament in context where there is no such thing. So it's just it's become a very strong word for be silent and come out from him. Kai ripsan auton tai daimonion est tomison exaelthen abautu meden blapsan auton. So we get some neuter aorist participles, ripsan and blapsan here. Neuter because it's agreeing with daimonion. So the demon, having hurled him from ripto is the verb, it's the aorist participle, having hurled him into the middle, it came out from him, injuring, this is from blapto, injuring him in no way. So it didn't injure him. Interestingly, Mark actually at this point, I think from memory, says something like it convulsed him. I think it uses that verb sparasso, but Luke doesn't do that. He says it didn't cause him any injury. Kai egeneto thambos epipantas kai sun elalun proselelus legontes. And there was a thambos, a wonder or amazement upon all of them, and they were speaking with one another, saying, Tis hologos hutos, what is this word? Because in exousia kaiduname epitase tois akathartois pneumasi kaiex kontai, because with authority and power, this is a dative from dunamis, epitase, he gives orders to the unclean spirits, and they come out. Kai ex eporueto akos periautu espanta topontes perikoro. Now we get akos here. This is our word echo, in fact. It's a K in classical Greek. It's a little, I think Mark does have a different word here. It's a bit stronger than pheme, which is report, or akoe. This is really a sort of a word passed around from one to the other. It's this idea of echoing. So we'd probably say a report went out regarding him, perhaps gossip or news, as panta top onto every place of the perikoru, the surrounding area. Anastas de apo te synagoges es elthen estain oikean Simonos. So having got up from the synagogue, he went into the house of Simon. In fact, I think technically it's the house that belonged to Simon's mother-in-law, who's now mentioned. Penthera de tu Simonos ein sun ekomene purito megalo kai erotes anauton periotes. The Penthera, the mother-in-law of Simon, she was sun ekomene. So this is a passive. It means here afflicted. She was held down by, so hence afflicted by a great puritos is a fever. You can see the pur, the fire root in here. So she was held down by a great fever, and they asked him periautes regarding her. From erotao is the verb here, to ask. Kai epistas epano autes epitimes in to purito kai efekan auten. And having stood above her, having stood near or upon above her, standing close upon her, he rebuked the fever, and efekan auton, and it departed from her, it left her. From aphiemi. Parakrema, now that's an adverb here, it means immediately, forthwith. It's a perfectly good classical word. And forthwith, kai anastasa, having stood up, di ekone autois. She began to minister to them. Now this is a funny example here of where the original verb is diakoneo, it's a contract epsilon verb, but it's not a compound. It's not dia plus coneo. It's diakoneo is the verb itself. It's not a compound. But they've treated it as though it were a compound, and they've augmented the alpha when they really should have put an augment at the beginning. But this happened to this verb very commonly in the New Testament, and probably a bit earlier as well. But technically, it's an irregularity. It's an imperfect, and you get a contract at the end here. Dunontos de tu heliu hapantes hosoi eken, asthenuntas nosois poikilois, egonautois pros auton. You get a nice genitive absolute. We haven't seen too many of those. Here's one here. And the sun having set, all of them, as many as had we have to understand friends or relatives or something here being ill, because this is the object of the acon. So as many as had people who were sick with various diseases, this expression also is in Mark. Poikilos is a lovely word with a huge range of meanings. Here it just means all sorts of various kinds of, it can mean intricate, elaborate, painted, anything which is complicated. It's got a huge range of meanings. Here it just means with various sorts of, I think. With various sorts of diseases. And nosos is a feminine, second declension feminine noun, hence the feminine ending in the adjective. So they brought them, that is all the ones who were asthenuntas, who were sick, to him. Hode heni hekasto auton taskeras epitites etherapuen autus. And he, having placed the hands on each one of them. So we get this to each one of on each one of them. So it's each heni is the dative from Hasmea hen 1. So he, having placed his hands on each one of them, he began to heal autus them. Exercite decai daimonia apopollon crowd adds on to kai legonta hoti sue hopios to theou kai epitimon uk ea auta lelain hoti edesen ton Christon auton eino. Now the subject of the verb here is ta daimonia, so we'll get plural subject, singular verb, which you sometimes do, sometimes don't. Luke generally does, but not always. So demons came out from many, and then participle here, agreeing with daimonia, so this is a neuter plural participle. Now you'll see the square brackets here, so it's either from krasdo or kraugazdo. They basically mean the same thing, crying out. They're just different forms of the same verbs, and it's not clear whether this should be there or not. I think Mark has krasdo here, and perhaps some later writer has added in kraugazdo, but it's just a synonym. So crying out and saying, and then we get inverted commas, hoti recitative, you are the Son of God. Kai rebuking them, uk aya. Now this is from eao. It's an alpha contract verb, eao, if you're looking it up in the dictionary, and this is the imperfect. He was not allowing them to speak. So you get a funny augment. The epsilon becomes epsilon iota, and then you get a, and that contracts to an alpha. So he was not allowing them to speak because they knew him to be the Messiah. And the final paragraph here. Genomenes dehemeras exelthon eporuthe es eremon topon kai hoi okloi epitsetun auton kai elthon hios autou kate con auton tu me porues thy epauton. And when it was day, having gone out, he went into a desolate place, not necessarily a desert, but a lonely place, a place where there were no people, for Eremon. Kai hoi okloi, and the crowds were seeking him, from Epitsatio. Again, this is in Mark's Gospel, and they came to him, and they katakon here, it's something like restrained. They restrained him, so they wouldn't not allow him. They restrained him so as not to go from them. So probably in the sense of they tried to detain him, and it's imperfect here. So they were holding him back, might be good here, so that he might not go from them. Hode apen, but he said to them, prosautus hoti, inverted commas again, kai tais heterois polisen euangelisas thy medae ten basilean to theou, hoti epi tuta epistelein. But it is necessary for me also to proclaim the gospel, to proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God to other cities. Because for this reason, epi tuta epistelein, this is aorist passive from apostello, I was sent out. This was why I was sent out. And he was proclaiming in the synagogues of Judea. And that is the end of chapter 4.